How concerned are you about your personal information floating around in cyberspace? Information that could make you vulnerable to identity theft and possible financial ruin. On this special live edition of Palmetto Scene, we look at the state of cybersecurity in South Carolina and invite you to get your questions answered. In 2012, when the South Carolina Department of Revenue was hacked, the information on the tax returns of millions of South Carolinians was stolen, including Social Security numbers and private financial information. That information is gold to crooks who want to steal our identity for their gain. Identity theft is happening everywhere. Recently, 2 national chain stores, Target and Neiman Marcus, were hit. And experts say many more have been victimized. It's a major security concern, which means we all must be vigilant. So what is South Carolina doing to protect us? And what must we do to protect ourselves? And good evening and welcome to Palmetto Scene Live. I'm P.A. Bennett. The state of South Carolina responded to the 2012 security breach at the Department of Revenue in a big way. A new division was created to handle cybersecurity, and the Department of Consumer Affairs took on heightened responsibilities. We have representatives from those 2 agencies with us this evening. Carrie Gruby-Leibarker heads the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs, and Marcos Vieira is the Chief Information Security Officer in the Division of Information Security. Also with us, fielding viewer questions via social media, is Tabitha Safdie.
That's right, PA. I'm going to be watching, keeping an eye on Twitter tonight. So if you have a question for our experts, you can just tweet me. It's at Palmetto Scene.
Thank you, Tabitha. And thank you, too, for being with us today. And I'm going to start with you, Marcos, because this is a new division, this security division. Tell us about this division, the name, and what are your responsibilities?
Yes, thank you for having me. The Division of Information Security is a newly formed division, and our primary mission is to help the state maintain, implement, support the information security program, which in essence is comprised of all of the things that people would expect. We do education and awareness. We help implement some of the technologies that our citizens have come to expect that, as it turns out, not everyone has implemented. And this goes not just for state government, but clearly large corporations, your doctor's office, your dentist's office. So part of what my division does is we not only help to educate, to implement those technologies, but we also watch the network. We look for signs of compromise. We try to keep our eyes on the bad guys, so to speak.
You're brand new, I know, so we'll get more and more information as we go along. Carrie, you're on the consumer end.
That's right.
Tell us about what you do.
Sure. So the Department of Consumer Affairs is the state's consumer protection agency. We have the administration and enforcement responsibility for the state's identity theft protection statute. So we have a new identity theft unit that we got and launched October 1st of this year to help us in the administration and enforcement of that law. So we do education, guidance, assist people who have had an identity theft event.
So is it becoming commonplace now for people to have these kinds of events?
Well, we at the Department of Consumer Affairs have been getting calls like this and questions about identity theft for some time. It was just the Department of Revenue breach certainly put a spotlight on it. Just to kind of give you some numbers, since July of 2008, we've gotten 127 notices that security breaches have happened that affected more than 7.3 million South Carolina consumers. 7.3 million?
Yeah,
and our population's 4 million, so that means a couple people are getting more than one security breach notice.
And I think it's a big question too, because people just think, okay, they're trying to get into my checking account maybe, or use my credit card. But there are all kinds of identity theft categories, if you will.
That's right. Identity thieves can use your personal identifying information in the same way that you can. So it's not just for financial crimes, to get that loan, to get a student loan even, but it could be to get utilities. There's a lot of different companies that will check a credit report before they're going to let you get a product or service. So they could be going to get a cell phone in your name. They could be filing your taxes in your name, using your medical benefits. It really does have a broad range.
Well, there's so many things that we have to look out for and be concerned about. I tell you what, let's go to Twitter and see if we have some questions coming in. We
do have a question, but first I want to remind everyone, if you do have a question, you can just tweet us at Palmetto Scene. The question actually comes from at Katie L. Gear. She wants to know, how do I know I've been hacked? Really good question.
That's a very good question, Tabitha. Sure. How do we know if we've been hacked?
Well, the state law for security breach notices requires somebody, a business or a state agency who has experienced a security breach to notify a consumer that that has actually happened. So usually that's the #1 way. Another way is by you monitoring your financial account statements, your medical benefits statements, Social Security statements, all of those, and that will usually give you a red flag, or your credit reports. You'll see something on your credit report, whether it's an address or an account that you don't recognize, those are red flags as well.
And what about our state agencies? How do they know that they've been hacked? For example, with the Department of Revenue, what told them that they'd been hacked?
So there's a lot of different ways that agencies and organizations can find out that they've been victims of a crime. One is if they detected themselves using their own internal resources, whether it's a security person or an alert system administrator, or even an end user. You might have received an email, there was an attachment that said it was an invoice from UPS. You opened it, and then you realize, oh, I really wasn't expecting a package from UPS. So being alert. Finding these situations can come from a variety of means. The Secret Service may show up at your organization one day and say, did you know that your customer's information is listed on this underground website for sale? You know, that is one way that organizations often find out that they've been the victims of a crime.
We've referenced several times the breach at the Department of Revenue, and for the millions affected by the 2012 Department of Revenue security breach, the state is providing identity protection through a company called CSID. Recently, we spoke with the owner of that company, Joe Ross. And good morning, Mr. Ross. Thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate your time. Sir, let me get started with a kind of a general question here, but I'm interested. What does CSID stand for exactly?
Funny thing is, I get asked that a lot, and as a startup company, when you originally come up with a name, you have to have something there. And the premise was that it was, the TV show back in the day was really quite popular, CSI, and they were looking at physical elements, and what we do is we look at digital DNA. Everyone leaves a physical kind of thumbprint whenever they transact online, and that was kind of where it came off of, was just a play on words.
Who in South Carolina is actually eligible for your protection, your identity theft protection?
Well, everyone is actually eligible to go and see if they can enroll in the process. There was a select group of people that were compromised in the hack, and the way the site is set up is that anyone that's a resident of South Carolina can go to the site, they enter their name, address, and the last 4 of the social, and the site will determine if they're eligible for the services.
Let's talk about some of those services. What exactly is included in your protection?
First and foremost, they get credit monitoring, which we monitor their credit file and will alert them to any new account openings, new trade lines opening up, etc. But then most folks think that's where identity theft stops, is just at credit. But there's a lot more use that the identity thieves do with the data that's stolen. So we monitor your criminal record file, and we'll alert you if there's a crime that's been committed with your identity. We monitor payday loan activity. Paydays loans are those high-interest pawn shop type loans. We'll alert you if there's a loan there. A lot of times identity thieves will use your information to register as a sex offender, so we monitor the sex offender files and alert you if we see your information there. We monitor a change of address file. That way there, if an identity thief tries to reroute your mail, we'll be able to alert you to that as well. We also monitor what we call public records. That alerts you to any use of your information. Meaning we'll let you know if your social has been used in a certain area and there's another name or alias associated with your social. And then we also offer $1 million insurance product, and that covers any expenses associated with recovering your identity. And finally, most importantly, we offer full service identity theft restoration service. What that means, if you should become a victim of identity theft, all you have to do is call our office. An agent will be assigned to you, and that agent will take over all the aspects of restoring your identity to where it was before the identity theft event.
So is it left to the individual to realize that they are a victim of identity theft, or will your company notify a person if they are a victim?
Well, that's what the product and service does. That alerts you to uses of your identity. So if we see a new account opening, you will receive an alert. Now, we don't know if that's you using your identity to open an account or an identity thief using your identity to open an account. But the goal of the service is we monitor all the aspects of your identity and give you these alerts so that you can make the determination, is it you acting as yourself or is it an identity thief using your identity?
At this point, how many South Carolinians have actually taken advantage of your protection?
There's about 200,000 individuals enrolled. And then the other aspect of our service is it covers children as well. So we have about 20,000 children. And so if you are an eligible adult, through the site, you can also enroll your children for monitoring also. And then we also have a business product. So if you're a business in South Carolina, we will monitor your domain name, so acmeplumbing.com or your IP addresses. We will alert you if we see those emails, passwords being compromised in the wild.
Now, millions of South Carolinians could potentially be affected. Is the percentage of South Carolinians who have taken advantage of your protection significant, or should there be a greater increase in the numbers?
Well, it depends. Right now there's so many breaches going on out there. A lot of folks feel they might be covered. Maybe they enrolled in the Target breach or the Nordstrom breach or maybe one of the other breaches earlier on. But what I would suggest is you never can have too much coverage, and none of the products are exactly alike. And since it is a free service, it behooves you to go ahead and enroll in this service even if you might be covered under another service as well.
Okay. Mr. Ross, thank you so much for your help and your protection for South Carolinians. And let me ask you, Carrie, listening to Mr. Ross, what kind of feedback? Are you getting any feedback from South Carolinians as to the protection services through this company? We
do. We get calls from consumers just generally, always asking about particular services, but we are the consumer complaint agency as well. So we get calls if people are frustrated. And we have received some calls, but luckily we've been working with the Department of Revenue to try and get those concerns alleviated or to assist in any way that we can to get the consumer to the end game that they need to be at.
I know I tried to enroll and I wasn't able to get through. Mm-hmm. Do you have those kinds of complaints that people are not being able to get through?
We did initially. Whenever the new program was rolled out is when you see the most people enroll in it. So we did receive more calls back in October, the beginning of November, to that regard, because it's a different kind of enrollment process than it was in the year previously, and it's a different kind of product. So a lot of people were confused or not realizing why they weren't able to go forward, because there actually was a verification process this time around. So it really was supposed to be good news if you weren't able to enroll, because that meant you weren't on the list of having your information being compromised in that DOR breach, but still there was a little bit of confusion with that.
When we look at agencies like the Department of Revenue, and I mentioned the Department of Motor Vehicles, and I'm thinking about our information being out there. If a breach should happen like that at another agency, would we get the same kind of protection?
So currently the protection that's in effect through CSID, they would still be in effect. Whether or not an additional year would be offered, don't know.
Yeah.
That'd be a decision that we would have to evaluate given the circumstances and severity and nature of the breach.
Because right now, that coverage ends when?
In October. But the legislature is reconsidering whether or not to extend the contract. That's something they would have to fund to move forward with.
How much is that costing the state?
I feel like it's around $6 million for some reason, but it may be more. Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. Now, generally the way those contracts work is there's a high-end dollar amount, and then we also get charged per sign-up. So there may be a minimum no matter how many people sign up, whether it's 10 or whether it's 200,000, we might be paying the same amount of money. But if we go over a certain amount, then we may be charged more. I don't know the details of the contract.
When consumers come to you asking questions, asking for help, what are the major questions? What are the major needs of consumers out there?
Well, a lot of people who contact us are either wanting to know what can I do to protect myself, or they've found evidence that they may be a victim of identity theft, and they want to know what they can do to stop the damage, to minimize the damage.
Now, Mr. Ross talked about them walking with the consumer. You also do some step-by-step aid with people who've been breached.
Right. We have a bunch of checklists that our identity theft unit utilizes in an intake form to figure out what exactly may be going on, to ask the questions that the consumer may not think about, to see how big the event may have been, or if it's just really tailored to one particular type, like a credit card or some kind of financial fraud, or is it deeper? And then we try and go through the process with them as far as saying, okay, this is your next step to stop the damage, whether it's placing a security freeze or a fraud alert, or contacting the financial institution who has that account open, just kind of going down that process and then letting them go and try and implement, and then of course contact us back if they have any further questions or need assistance further with that process.
Yeah, we need to ask you more questions about the security freeze or the fraud alert. What does that really mean? But I want to ask about the agencies and departments, state agencies and departments. Do you have any sense of whether or not they are ready to take on this challenge of being truly secure when it comes to the cyberspace issue?
That's a great question. One of the things that we all need to understand as citizens, myself included, even though I'm a Chief Information Security Officer, is we cannot let ourselves believe that there's such a thing as perfect security. Even with infinite resources, I cannot guarantee you that I will be able to keep your information perfectly safe. We know that we don't have infinite resources. We have small teams of people, dedicated people, who have the skills, the knowledge, the drive to try to help us keep our information safe. But we have to remember that as defenders, I have to be perfect every second, every day of the year. As an attacker, I only have to be lucky once, just once. And not only am I worried about the technology, but I'm worried about you as one of my end users accidentally opening a link via email, accidentally giving away your username and password. So not only do I have to worry about the bad guys, I have to worry about my own staff making a mistake, often very well intentioned, that could lead to a compromise. So as a defender, the odds are heavily against me.
Tabitha, we have some inquiries via Twitter.
Yeah, we had a really good question actually. At Good Football Fan asked, if I have terrible credit, do I need to worry about my identity getting stolen?
That is a good question.
It is.
Says, who would want it, huh?
Yeah, and we saw that. Yeah, some people are like, I don't care, whatever, they can have it. They can certainly have it. But I mean, again, it's not just to get credit. They may be going out and getting products and services to where your credit report's not even being touched. It could be, like I said earlier, your medical benefits, your tax returns. They could be pulled over on the side of the road for a crime, and they're giving your name and your information instead of their own. So it certainly goes above and beyond the credit report, but that consumer can call us too, because we can help them try and build their better credit report.
Okay, that's a great question, Tabitha. And when the South Carolina Department of Revenue was hacked in 2012, information on tax returns was open to being stolen. That includes our children's Social Security numbers. Lexington County Senator Katrina Shealy is lead sponsor on proposed legislation known as the Identity Protection Act. It would protect our state's most vulnerable.
You could go for 18 years and your child has, they haven't done anything, they haven't bought anything, they've gone through college, they've gone all the way through high school, gone through college, then they go to buy a car, they go to buy a house, and then they go to the bank and they find out that somebody's been using their Social Security number all this time. They've run up bad credit, they've got credit card debt, all these things, and then your child has no credit, or they have bad credit. They don't have good credit, they have bad credit. And so then they can't get a loan, or, and we all know how hard it is to erase bad credit. At the minimum, it takes 7 years to get rid of bad credit. And so then your child's stuck with the bad credit record. So this protects them so no one can access their credit, until you're ready for them to do that. What this does is it freezes their identity until they're old enough to use, their credit. And we could do the same thing with people that are, indigent, or people that are elderly, people that aren't using their credit. You can freeze their credit, freeze their identity. I think it's very important. I think it's very important for our children. I think it's very important for people who, have problems taking care of themselves, and I think it's very important for our senior citizens. I think this is something that we really need in South Carolina.
Senator Shealy's bill passed the Senate and is currently being debated in the House. And Tabitha, we have a question about this.
Yeah, another one from Good Football Fan. How can I protect my child's identity?
Yeah, very good question.
Sure. So I would say the first thing to do is to make sure you're protecting it. Make sure you're shredding items that have personal identifying information on it, whether or not it's a date of birth or a social security number. They're not laid out so that family members and friends or anybody coming to the home can see them easily and utilize them. Unfortunately, in South Carolina, we've had an above the national average amount of identity theft for children under the age of 18. We like to name our children after ourselves as well, which makes it a little easier sometimes for those close to us to take that identity and utilize it. And then whenever somebody asks for your child's information, ask them why. Ask them if there's that alternate identifier that they could use, or if they're asking for a social, can you just give them the last 5? I mean, do you actually have to handle that information? Do you have to give it to them in order for you to get whatever service you're asking for? And then if you do have to give it to them, how are they going to protect it? Who is going to see it? Who are they going to share it with? And how are they going to dispose of it?
So should you freeze your child's social security? Can you put a fraud alert on your child's social security number?
So right now, unless your child already has a credit report, you cannot place a fraud alert or a security freeze on it. That's what S-148 would permit you to do. S-148 would allow a file to be created with your children's information in it, so then it could freeze. So if any applications came in with that information, that account would not be approved. But right now, really only a parent can just contact each one of the 3 credit reporting agencies and see by entering their child's information if a credit report already exists.
And that brings to mind the agencies that deal a lot with children. Are they doing anything special, or do you plan on doing anything special with these agencies to make sure that the child's information isn't compromised?
Yes, ma'am. Our efforts are going to be statewide. Currently, we're focusing, with the help of Deloitte and some of the other resources that we have available, we're taking a risk-based approach. We're focusing our limited resources on the areas where we have evidence or we believe the risk is the greatest. And again, we will have to continue to take that approach. It's a good use of taxpayer money. We're all taxpayers. And again, the idea here is that we cannot afford to spend the same amount of money to protect each agency equally, and not every agency has the same type and sensitivity of information. So we want to make sure that we're smart and that we're addressing the risks, the highest risks, as quickly as possible.
Tabitha, we have another viewer question?
Yeah, we have another question, and this one's from @Natalie Zander. How long does the state provide credit protection?
And that's a very good question, because we didn't get to that totally. How long, and what's happening when it comes to an end?
Yeah, so the current product, the CSID product, is good through October. Consumers can sign up until October 1 of this year to enroll in that. And right now, the legislature is currently debating the budget for next fiscal year, which begins July 1. And I know that the House Full Ways and Means Committee has included funding for some kind of protection for consumers. So it's certainly still being debated over there at the State House.
So do you feel good about the fact that it's going to be extended?
Sure. I mean, I think that the state certainly recognizes the position that we're in, but I also don't want consumers to use that as a crutch either. I think it's very important to realize that we are responsible for protecting our information, and just because a third party is hired doesn't take you out of the picture.
And that brings me back, Marcos, to whether or not our legislators are fully behind getting our state agencies protected as relates to cybersecurity.
Well, you know, I believe that nobody wants to see any further personal information leaked or other sensitive information. Not mine, not yours. So certainly nobody wants to see that happen again. Of course, we could all argue about what the right way to do it is, how best to spend money, but from the perspective of utilizing the resources that my division has available to help the people of South Carolina, we will do our best to ensure that we're using that money wisely and as effectively as we can.
I know one of the things that you both said to me as relates to having your information out there and may be utilized in a very unfortunate way or a criminal way. You said it's not if but when. I mean, it's that critical.
Right. It's unfortunately the day and age that we live in. And, you know, while we focus on the big hacks that come through and information, some people will say, well, you know, I don't do things online. That doesn't mean that your information isn't going out into the cyber universe. Just because you're not directly putting it in there doesn't mean whoever you're doing business with isn't. So it's just the risks are certainly out there. And then a lot of times it's those who are close to you who have easy access to that information. It's not the hacker you don't know, it's the people that you do.
Oh, wow. Boy, you really scared us good tonight. And thank you so much. We really appreciate you being with us. The need for cybersecurity is growing. We must take responsibility to protect ourselves while making sure that strong legislation and protective agencies are in place to serve us. For more information on all that you've seen this evening, go to our website, palmettoscene.org. Thanks to our guest and to all of you for joining us. For Palmetto Scene and ETV, I'm P.A. Bennett. Good night.